Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. The first time she told me there would be no intimacy, it sounded temporary, framed like discipline, like something I'd earned and could earn back. The second time, it became a rule. By the third time, it was policy. And then one night, months later, she complained to her friends that I never touched her anymore. That was the moment something inside me went quiet. My name is Mark Ellison. I'm 43. I calibrate industrial systems for a living. Conveyor logic, pressure thresholds, timing errors no one else notices until everything fails. I don't improvise. I don't argue with noise. I adjust what's measurable and move on. Laura used to say that steadiness was what she loved about me, before she started calling it distance. She managed events, corporate retreats, charity galas, milestone birthdays for people who wanted applause more than meaning. She lived in calendars and lighting plans, in how things looked from the outside. I lived in outcomes. The intimacy band started quietly. She said she needed space, said closeness felt like pressure, said if I really respected her, I'd wait. So I did. Weeks, then months. I slept on my side of the bed like it was a line on the floor. No fights, no ultimatums. I adjusted. She filled the silence with activity. Dinners, planning calls, weekend gatherings. Her favorite was hosting. Long tables, loud laughter. Everyone fed, everyone watching. The Saturday before Thanksgiving, we did a full run to Sam's Club. Bulk everything. Food for people who stayed too long. I pushed the cart. She checked items off her phone. That was our rhythm. Evan came that night. He always did. Old friend. Fitness instructor. The guy who remembered everyone's birthday and never forgot to smile. He hugged Laura a second longer than necessary. I noticed. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was consistent. Later, as everyone ate, Laura laughed about how married life killed passion. She said it lightly, like a joke that wasn't meant for me, but landed anyway. She said some men got too comfortable. She said she felt invisible. No one looked at me. That was the part that mattered. I drove home alone after dropping a few guests off. Sat in the driveway with the engine running. My Dodge Ram ticking as it cooled. I didn't feel angry. Anger makes mistakes. Inside, Laura had left her bracelet on the counter. The Pandora one I'd bought her years ago, back when touch was allowed. I set it neatly beside her phone and went to the spare room. That night, I didn't sleep. I measured. I didn't confront her. Confrontation assumes confusion. I wasn't confused. I was recalibrating. The next morning, Laura moved through the house like nothing had happened. Coffee, phone, calendar. She talked about seating charts and vendor delays while I packed my lunch. She never mentioned the joke. Never mentioned the silence. That was her skill. If something stayed unspoken long enough, she treated it as resolved. I drove to work before sunrise. The truck felt heavier than usual, like it was carrying more than tools. On my first break, instead of eating what I'd brought, I pulled into a Taco Bell off the service road. Same booth. Same order. I watched people come and go without noticing each other. It felt honest. That week, patterns started to surface. Not accusations. Data. Evan's name came up more often. Always casually. Always useful. He helped move chairs. He stayed late to clean. He was already nearby more than made sense. Laura's phone started lighting up during hours she used to ignore it. She angled the screen away without realizing she was doing it. At home, the intimacy band tightened. Not just physical. She stopped asking about my day. Stopped syncing schedules. We existed in parallel, sharing a roof and nothing else. At night, she'd sit on the couch scrolling, a PlayStation controller idle on the coffee table, waiting for something that didn't arrive. I started staying later at work. Not to avoid her. To observe myself. See what broke first. Nothing did. Instead, I began making small adjustments. I rerouted my paycheck into a separate account. Not all of it. Just enough. I listed and used tools and old gear on eBay. Items she wouldn't notice until they were gone. Each sale felt like removing weight from a structure before demolition. One evening, I came home early. Evan's shoes were by the door. Athletic. Clean. Laura's voice carried from the kitchen, lighter than it had been with me in months. I didn't step inside. I didn't listen. I walked back out and drove until the city thinned. That night, she texted asking where I was. I didn't answer until morning. A single sentence. Said I'd fallen asleep somewhere quiet. She didn't push. That was the tell. The next weekend, She hosted again. Smaller group. Same dynamic. Evan everywhere. I watched from the edge of the room, already outside it. When Laura brushed past me, there was no contact. Just air. Later, alone, I opened my notebook. Wrote 3 words. Distance. Timing. Exit. I wasn't planning revenge. I was designing absence. Once you stop reacting, people start revealing themselves. Laura didn't accuse me of pulling away. She reframed it. Told friends I was in a phase. Said work had made me distant. She said it kindly, like a professional explaining weather patterns. I heard it the way I hear a machine mislabel a fault. Calm. Incorrect. The house shifted around her schedule. Dinners moved later. Lights stayed on longer. Evan's presence became assumed. His jacket hung over a chair like it belonged there. No one asked my permission. That was the point. I kept my routines intact. Same wake-up time. Same commute. Same silence. I didn't ask questions that would force lies into the open. Lies leave residue. I preferred clean lines. One night, I came home to laughter already in progress. Laura and Evan in the kitchen. Music low. Not hidden. Comfortable. I took a bottle of water from the fridge and nodded once, like I would to a coworker I didn't need to supervise. Evan's smile faltered. Just a fraction. Enough. Later, in bed, Laura lay stiff, turned away. The band no longer needed explanation. It existed on its own authority. I slept anyway. The following week, she planned another gathering. She asked if I'd be home early to help. I said nothing. Not out of spite. Because my presence was no longer required for the system to run. That afternoon, I drove past our street and didn't turn in. I parked near the river and watched the water move without urgency. That's when it clicked. She wasn't hiding the affair. She was insulating it, wrapping it in normalcy until it felt earned. At the store later, I picked up basics and nothing else. The kind of trip that leaves no trace. At the register, my phone buzzed. A message from Laura asking if I'd grab extra plates. I didn't reply. When I got home, the house was full. Voices overlapping. Someone had turned on the PlayStation. Evan sat where I usually did, controller in hand, laughing like he'd been invited permanently. Laura didn't look at me when I walked in. I went to the garage and closed the door, sat on a crate, and listened to the muffled sound of my own life continuing without me. That night, after everyone left, Laura said she felt lonely lately. She said she didn't understand why I wasn't trying anymore. I nodded once. In the quiet, I checked my account. Another item sold. Another piece gone. She thought the distance was punishment. It wasn't. It was infrastructure. The shift didn't announce itself. It never does. It shows up as convenience. Laura stopped asking where I was. She stopped syncing calendars. She assumed I'd adapt the way I always had. That assumption was the final gift she gave me. I started taking the long way home. Not to think. To confirm. When someone is building a second life, they reuse patterns. Same nights. Same gaps. Same excuses dressed slightly different. Once you see the loop, you stop questioning the outcome. On Tuesdays, I didn't go home at all. I ate alone, late, sitting in the same Taco Bell booth with my back to the window. I didn't scroll. I didn't rush. I watched the staff clean around me like I was part of the furniture. It felt right. At home, my absence created no disruption. That told me everything. One night, I came back earlier than expected. The house was quiet. Too quiet for a place that had been full of people an hour earlier. Laura was in the shower. Evan's jacket hung by the door again. Not hidden. Dry. I didn't touch it. I went into the bedroom and opened the drawer where she kept jewelry she wore only for events. The Pandora bracelet wasn't there anymore. She'd put it on. Not for me. For continuity. Symbols matter to people who trade in appearances. I closed the drawer and sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't feel rage. I felt alignment. Everything finally matched. That night, she talked about an upcoming charity dinner. She said Evan had offered to help with setup. She said it casually, like weather. I acknowledged it with a nod. No questions. No tone. Later, alone, I logged into eBay and listed the last item that tied me to shared history. A watch I never wore anymore. It sold within minutes. I transferred the money and logged out. The next morning, Laura complained about feeling unwanted. She said intimacy shouldn't feel like an obligation. She said she needed to feel chosen. I didn't correct her. I packed a small bag and left it in the trunk. Not because I was leaving yet. Because preparation changes posture. You stand differently when you know the exit exists. That weekend, She hosted again. Same table. Same laughter. Same assumptions. Evan sat closer this time. No one noticed me watching. At the end of the night, Laura made a comment about how relationships die when men stop trying. She said it publicly, lightly, designed to land. I smiled. Just once. Because the system was ready. And systems don't announce shutdowns. Public moments are where people reveal what they think is safe. Laura chose the holiday dinner. Neutral ground. Long table. Enough witnesses to make anything sound like a joke. She planned it the way she planned everything, with lighting and timing, and just enough wine to blur intent without erasing it. I arrived on time. Sat where I was told. Watched her move through the room, touching shoulders, laughing on cue. Evan stayed close, always half a step behind her, like support staff that forgot its role. Halfway through the meal, she leaned back in her chair and said something about intimacy again. About how it fades when effort disappears. She said it to the room, not to me. She said some men confuse silence with strength. Laughter followed. Not cruel. Comfortable. I didn't look at her. I didn't look at him. I took a sip of water and let the moment pass through me without resistance. That was the pivot. After dessert, people lingered. Someone turned on music. Someone mentioned a game. The PlayStation hummed to life in the living room, a familiar sound I used to associate with weekends. Evan took the controller without asking. Laura sat beside him. I stood, thanked no one, and walked out. No announcement. No slammed door. I drove until the neighborhood lights gave way to street lamps, and then to nothing. I parked behind the building I'd already scoped weeks earlier. Small unit. Close to work. No shared walls. I sat there for a long time with the engine off, listening to the quiet settle. The next morning, I didn't go home. I went to work, finished my shift, and stopped for food out of habit. Same Taco Bell. Same booth. I ate slowly, like this was now part of a different routine. When I checked my phone, there were messages. Not many. She assumed I was cooling off. That I'd return once the mood passed. People who rely on control mistake silence for compliance. I spent the evening moving the rest of my things. Only what mattered. No photos. No shared decor. I left the house clean. Bed made. Kitchen wiped. No note. By the time she realized I wasn't coming back, it was already late. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry. Because the door was no longer mine to open. The power had shifted. Quietly. Silence changes shape when it's no longer temporary. The first day, Laura treated my absence like a scheduling error. A miscommunication. She left messages spaced just far enough apart to suggest patience. No accusations. No questions that required answers. By the second day, the tone shifted. She checked logistics. Asked if I was staying with someone. If work had sent me out of town. She needed a category to put me in. I gave her none. I didn't block her. Blocking creates friction. I let the messages arrive and remain unanswered. The phone stayed face down on the table while I unpacked in the new place. One room. Clean lines. Nothing that needed explaining. I slept better than I had in months. At work, nothing changed. Systems ran. Problems surfaced and got solved. I didn't bring my personal life with me. I never had before. On breaks, I ate alone and watched the day move forward without commentary. That evening, I listed the last shared item online. Not because I needed the money. Because I needed the finality. When it sold, I didn't feel relief. I felt completion. By the third day, Laura's messages came faster. Shorter. She referenced the house. The schedule. The holidays. She said we needed to talk like adults. She said she didn't understand what was happening. I understood perfectly. She started showing up where she thought I might be. At my usual grocery store. At my old gym. At the places I used to exist predictably. She didn't find me. Predictability was something I'd already dismantled. That night, she messaged again. Said the house felt empty. Said she was tired of waiting. Said intimacy couldn't just disappear without a conversation. I didn't respond. I imagined her sitting on the couch, the PlayStation glowing in a quiet living room, controller untouched. Waiting for noise that wouldn't return. Waiting for permission she'd already revoked months ago. On the fourth day, she stopped messaging. That's when I knew the pressure had shifted inward. Silence doesn't just remove sound. It removes leverage. Without my reactions, her story had no antagonist. No friction. Just unanswered space. I drove past the old neighborhood once. Not to check on her. To confirm distance. The house looked the same. Lights on. Curtains drawn. A life continuing without context. I didn't slow down. This wasn't punishment. It was architecture. And the structure held. Absence forces people to rewrite their narratives. A week after I left, Laura started adjusting the story. Not to me. To everyone else. She framed it as space. As a mutual reset. She told people I needed time, and she was giving it generously. Control doesn't disappear. It relocates. I heard about it indirectly. A coworker mentioned seeing her at Sam's Club, loading bulk items alone, looking frustrated. Another said she'd canceled an event last minute. Nothing dramatic. Just small fractures in the image she maintained so carefully. She reached out again on day 9. Not with questions. With nostalgia. She referenced early years. Trips. The bracelet. She said the Pandora piece didn't feel the same anymore, like it had lost its meaning. That message sat unread until morning. Then it stayed that way. I wasn't avoiding pain. I was avoiding loops. At the new place, routines locked in. Wake. Work. Eat. Sleep. No waiting. No negotiating the atmosphere of a room. The quiet wasn't empty. It was precise. One evening, after a long shift, I drove past the old neighborhood again. This time, Evan's car was in the driveway. Parked confidently. Not hidden. I noted it the way I'd note a reading on a gauge. Confirmation, not surprise. I didn't stop. That night, Laura sent one more message. Short. Direct. She said she felt abandoned. Said I'd shut down instead of fighting. Said intimacy needed effort from both sides. She still didn't understand the order of operations. The next morning, I finalized the paperwork I'd been preparing quietly. Address updates. Account changes. Nothing hostile. Nothing dramatic. Just alignment between reality and documentation. I sold the last shared household item online before work. It was gone by lunch. When I transferred the money, I didn't think about what it used to represent, only what it no longer controlled. At the end of the week, she stopped posting, stopped hosting, stopped projecting. People notice when the noise drops. They fill the gaps themselves. I stayed out of sight, not because I was hiding, because visibility was no longer useful. Silence does something specific when it's consistent. It removes the other person's ability to pace the story. Without reactions, without arguments, without presence, there's nothing to push against. That's when consequences stop being negotiable. I wasn't winning. I was exiting clean. And clean exits echo longer than confrontations ever do. People expect closure to arrive with noise. Papers slammed. Voices raised. Someone begging to be understood. When that doesn't happen, they start inventing meanings to fill the gap. Laura tried once more indirectly. She didn't call me. She emailed a neutral subject line, like something work-related. Inside, she wrote about logistics. Bills. The house. She said we needed to align before things got messy. That word stood out. Messy. I replied with a single confirmation. No commentary. No emotion. Just acknowledgement. That was when she realized I wasn't coming back to negotiate the past. I was organizing the future without her input. She showed up at my workplace 2 days later. Not inside. She waited in the parking lot, near my truck, like proximity alone could trigger obligation. I saw her from the window. I didn't go out. Not because I was afraid of the conversation. Because the conversation had already happened. Months ago, when intimacy became conditional and silence was used as leverage. At lunch, I drove off-site. Same Taco Bell. Same seat. I ate without checking my phone. When I came back, she was gone. That night, I finalized the last loose end. One remaining shared account I hadn't touched yet. I transferred my portion and closed it. The confirmation email felt heavier than the number it referenced. Not because of money, because it erased a reason to reach out. Laura stopped messaging after that. I heard through someone else that Evan had moved in. Quietly. Not announced. Just a toothbrush appearing where mine used to be. It made sense. He was already occupying the space. I'd simply removed the overlap. She posted again after a long silence. A photo of a dinner setup. Carefully framed. No faces. Just atmosphere. Control reasserting itself. I didn't react. At the end of the month, I sold the last item still tied to that house on eBay. It shipped the same day. When I printed the label, I felt something close to relief. Not because I'd escaped. Because nothing was left unresolved. Silence isn't passive. It's active restraint. It's choosing not to hand someone the reaction they're trained to manage. Laura complained once that I never fought for us. She was right. I didn't fight. I withdrew support. And without support, even the loudest structures collapse under their own weight. By the time the paperwork arrived, it felt procedural. No drama attached. No shock. Just envelopes and confirmations moving through systems the way they were designed to. I signed what needed signing, scanned what needed scanning, and sent it back without commentary. Clean inputs produce clean outputs. Laura didn't contest anything. That surprised people. It didn't surprise me. Conflict requires energy, and she was already spending hers elsewhere, maintaining an image that no longer included me. We never met to talk it through. There was no final scene. No coffee shop conversation. No tears. The absence of that moment bothered her more than any argument ever could have. I knew that because she tried to recreate it later. She sent one last message asking if we could get closure. Not reconciliation. Closure. The kind that lets someone file an experience away without guilt. I read it once and didn't reply. Closure isn't something you receive. It's something you deny. I heard that Evan struggled with the transition. Not with her. With the role. Being a presence is different from being a foundation. He was used to attention, not responsibility. The dynamic shifted once the house stopped feeling like a stage. One night, weeks later, I drove past the old place again. Habit, maybe. Or confirmation. Lights on. Curtains open. A familiar hum inside. Someone had turned on the PlayStation, the blue glow visible from the street. I didn't stop. I didn't need to know who was holding the controller. My world had narrowed in the best way. Fewer variables. Fewer dependencies. I spent evenings reading or sitting in silence without feeling like I was withholding something. No one was waiting for me to perform. At work, I took on a new project. Long hours. High precision. The kind of task that rewards focus and punishes distraction. I felt sharper than I had in years. Laura stopped mentioning me altogether after that. My name disappeared from her orbit. That was her version of control returning. Rewriting history by omission. It didn't bother me. What bothered her, I suspect, was that I never corrected the story. Never explained. Never defended myself. Without my version, hers floated unsupported. Silence doesn't argue. It waits. And waiting, done properly, outlasts everything built on reaction. I didn't win anything. I removed myself from a structure that required my presence to function. What collapsed afterward wasn't my responsibility. It was inevitable. The quiet doesn't feel dramatic when it settles. It feels earned. Months passed without markers. No anniversaries. No sudden realizations. Just days stacking cleanly on top of each other. I stopped measuring time by what was missing and started noticing what wasn't required anymore. I never heard directly how things ended with Laura and Evan. Only fragments. A missed event. A canceled trip. The kind of details people share when they don't know which side you're on. I stayed neutral. Neutrality confuses people who expect allegiance. Once, late, I stopped at the same Taco Bell out of habit. Sat in the same booth. Same lights. Same silence. But it didn't feel like retreat anymore. It felt like punctuation. A place I no longer needed but recognized for what it had been. I thought about the intimacy she'd banned. How control had disguised itself as boundaries. How silence had been used as a tool until I repurposed it. That's the thing about leverage. It only works if the other person stays in position. I changed positions. I moved closer to work. Smaller space. Fewer things. Nothing ornamental. Everything intentional. When something broke, I fixed it. When something didn't belong, I removed it. No debates. Occasionally, someone would ask if I regretted not fighting harder. Not explaining. Not demanding answers. I never responded directly. Regret assumes loss. I didn't lose anything that was mine. One evening, driving home, I passed a familiar intersection near the old neighborhood. I didn't turn. I didn't slow. Muscle memory fades when it's no longer rewarded. I heard Laura had started hosting again. Smaller groups. Different energy. The PlayStation glow still showed up in photos sometimes, cropped into the background like an artifact she couldn't quite remove. Control leaves fingerprints even when the hands are gone. I never reached out. Not because I was healed. Because healing wasn't the goal. Alignment was. Some men shout when they're betrayed. Some demand explanations. Some need the other person to admit fault so they can move forward. I didn't need any of that. I adjusted inputs. Removed myself from the system. Let it run without me. And it did. Not well. But that was never my problem to solve. Silence isn't weakness. It's the sound a man makes when he's already gone. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.